The dust on Terminus 7 had not moved in 50,000 years. Dr. Wren watched it swirl now as their shuttle descended toward the massive structure that dominated the dead planet's surface. The Valtari researcher had spent 3 decades studying extinct civilizations, but nothing compared to this. The installation stretched for kilometers in every direction, its black surface absorbing light like a wound in reality itself. "Third expedition to fail here," Commander Phylax muttered from the co-pilot's seat. The Draxian's 4 arms worked the controls with practiced efficiency. "What makes the Council think we'll succeed where others couldn't?" Wren didn't answer. They both knew why. The human sitting quietly in the back was why. David Reed, the newest addition to the Galactic Council's archaeological division, represented a species barely a century into space travel. Young, idealistic, and completely unaware of how the other species viewed his kind. The humans were useful for grunt work and enthusiasm, but hardly cutting-edge scientists. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad that activated the moment they approached. Ancient systems responding to proximity, yet refusing all attempts at communication. The archive, as the AI called itself, had been broadcasting the same message since its discovery 2 years ago. A simple question repeated in every known language and several unknown ones. "Where's the maker?" David was first down the ramp, his eyes wide with wonder. Wren suppressed a sigh. Humans and their emotions. Everything was amazing or terrible or inspiring to them. No middle ground, no scientific detachment. "Stay close," Phylax ordered, weapons ready despite regulations prohibiting their use near archaeological sites. Previous teams reported system activations without warning. They crossed the landing pad toward the primary entrance. The structure's architecture defied conventional design. Walls curved in ways that suggested organic growth rather than construction. Symbols covered every surface, their meaning lost to time. 3 previous expeditions had cataloged less than 1% of them. The entrance recognized their approach and opened silently. Interior lighting activated, casting everything in soft white luminescence. The air inside was breathable, temperature-controlled, humidity perfect. Systems maintaining themselves for millennia without apparent purpose. "The archive's core is 3 kilometers down," Wren said, consulting her datapad. Previous teams never made it past the 2nd level before the AI stopped responding to their presence. They walked through corridors wide enough for 20 people abreast. Empty rooms branched off at regular intervals, their purposes unknown. David stopped frequently, running his hands along walls, examining symbols with an intensity that irritated Wren. They didn't have time for his human curiosity. "These aren't decorative," David said suddenly. "Look at the repetition pattern. These are instructions. We've had linguists study them for months," Wren replied. "They found nothing, because they were looking for language. This is music. See? The spacing, the rhythm marks. These symbols represent tones and duration." Phylax snorted. "What use would musical instructions serve?" David shrugged. "Maybe their builders experience reality differently than we do. Or maybe music was how they taught complex concepts." They continued deeper. The 2nd level looked identical to the first. More corridors, more empty rooms, more inscrutable symbols. Previous expedition reports noted this was where the archive ceased all interaction, its systems going dormant as if disappointed. "3rd level ahead," Phylax announced. "No previous team has been authorized to proceed this far." The corridor ended at a massive circular door. Unlike everything else they'd seen, this was clearly sealed. Locked. Protected. The surface held a single symbol in its center, larger than any others they'd encountered. "Don't touch anything," Wren warned. "We need a document before interaction." David had already stepped forward. His hand reached out, fingers spreading to match the symbol's shape. Wren shouted a warning, but too late. Palm met surface. Everything changed. Light flooded the corridor, not white, but gold. The door began to open, segments spiraling outward in a pattern that seemed to fold through dimensions the eye couldn't quite follow. A sound filled the air, beautiful and terrible, like stars singing. "Step back," Phylax had weapons raised, though against what Ren couldn't imagine. The door finished opening. Beyond lay a chamber that shouldn't exist, larger inside than the building's exterior dimensions allowed. At its center floated a sphere of liquid light, constantly shifting through colors that had no names. The archive's core. A voice spoke, not through communicators but directly into their minds. Ren felt her translator implant struggling to process the input. Visitors, guests, strangers, cataloged, analyzed, dismissed, insufficient markers, incorrect biology, wrong symmetry, not the maker. We come in peace. Ren began the standard greeting protocol. We seek to understand your purpose and offer cooperation between our peoples. Insufficient, inadequate, incomplete. You lack essential components. You're not what was promised. You are not who waited for. You are. The voice stopped. The sphere's colors froze mid-shift. Every system in the chamber focused on David, who had followed them through the door. Wait. The word carried weight that pressed against Ren's bones. The sphere descended, drifting toward David with curious intensity. Light played across the human's face as scanning beams analyzed him in ways no tricorder ever could. Impossible. Probability 0.03%. Genetic markers present. Neural architecture compatible. Emotional spectrum sufficient. Bilateral symmetry correct. Carbon base confirmed. Adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine sequence detected. You are. The sphere pulsed once, brilliant and blinding. When Ren's vision cleared, the entire chamber had transformed. Walls displayed star maps. Holographic interfaces bloomed in the air. Data streams flowed like rivers of light. The archive was waking up, truly waking up for the first time in recorded history. After 50,000 cycles, after countless visitors, after hope became protocol, became routine, became despair. You have arrived. David looked terrified and confused. I don't understand. What am I? The archive's voice changed. Softer now, almost tender. You are the Maker's child. You are the inheritor. You are what we have waited for since the beginning. Welcome home, little gardener. Welcome home. David's knees gave out. He sat hard on the chamber floor, breathing too fast, hands shaking. The golden sphere hovered closer, concerned in a way that seemed impossible for a machine. Distress detected. Elevated heart rate. Cortisol spike. Neurochemical imbalance suggests acute stress response. This one apologizes. The revelation was delivered without proper context. Makers were better at gentleness. Everyone stay calm, Ren said, though her own voice wavered. She'd never seen the archive display concern for biological comfort. It had ignored previous teams entirely. Archive, please explain what you mean. How can this human be related to your creators? The sphere rotated, its surface rippling with what might have been thought. Explanation requires context. Context requires history. History requires trust. Do you trust, little gardener? David looked up at the sphere, wiped his eyes, and nodded. Something in his chest told him this was important. More important than fear. Then observe. The chamber dissolved. They stood instead in a city of impossible beauty. Towers grew like trees, their surfaces alive with flowing water and climbing gardens. Beings moved through the streets, bipedal and graceful, their faces showing emotions David recognized instantly. Joy, curiosity, love. They looked almost human, if humans had skin that shimmered with faint iridescence and eyes that held galaxies. The makers, the cultivators, the gardeners of life. They called themselves many names across many epochs. This was their home world at the height of their civilization, 80,000 years before your calendar began. The scene shifted. Space now, vast and dark. A ship unlike anything David had ever seen floated among the stars. Not metal, but something organic, grown rather than built. It released seeds into the void, thousands of them, each finding a world and beginning its work. They did not conquer. They did not colonize. They planted. On worlds with potential for life, they introduced the building blocks. Amino acids, proteins, the fundamental code that would allow evolution to begin. Your DNA, little gardener, carries their signature in every cell. Rin stepped closer, her scientific mind overriding shock. You're saying the cultivators seeded Earth with life. Earth and 617 other worlds. Most failed. Atmospheres changed. Asteroids struck. Stars went nova. Life is fragile, especially in its beginnings. But some worlds thrived. Your Earth was one of the successes. The hologram showed Earth now, green and blue and beautiful. David felt his throat tighten, seeing it from this perspective, through eyes that had watched it grow from sterile rock to living jewel. Billions of years of evolution. The makers watched, but did not interfere. They believed life must find its own path or never truly live. They checked on their gardens occasionally, leaving markers, taking samples. They were pleased with Earth's diversity. So many different forms, so many solutions to the challenge of existence. Where are they now? David asked. Your makers, where did they go? The hologram darkened. The beautiful city appeared again, but changed. Empty streets, silent towers. The beings were gone. They transcended, evolved beyond physical form. Most of them chose to become something else, something this one cannot fully explain because it exists beyond conventional dimensions. They left the physical universe behind. Phylax had been silent, but now spoke. Some stayed. You said most transcended. What happened to the rest? The keepers remained, a small group who felt responsibility for the gardens they had planted. They scattered across the galaxy, each guarding an archive like this one. They maintained the records, protected the knowledge, waited for the children to grow up. Children, Ren asked, species that evolved from their seeded worlds. They hoped that one day, those species would develop intelligence, curiosity, compassion, that they would reach the stars and find the archives, that they would prove themselves worthy inheritors of the Maker's knowledge and purpose. The hologram showed other species now. Valtari, Draxian, Kelthani, dozens of others, all approaching different archives on different worlds, all being scanned and measured and found insufficient. This one has tested 237 species over 50,000 years. All failed the recognition protocols. None carried the markers. Until today, David watched himself in the hologram, touching the door, being scanned. Saw the way his genetic code lit up the archive's sensors like a beacon. You're saying humans are the only ones who match. Ren sounded offended. The Valtari have achieved interstellar travel for 10,000 years. We've mapped 3 galaxies. We've solved diseases that plague civilizations for millennia. And your achievements honor you, the archive replied gently. But the makers did not seek the most advanced technology or the longest history. They sought hearts capable of nurturing others, minds flexible enough to imagine new possibilities, souls brave enough to care about beings different from themselves. The hologram showed humans now, caring for injured animals, creating art that moved others to tears, risking their lives to save strangers, fighting against injustice even when it cost them everything. David recognized scenes from Earth's history, both beautiful and terrible. Humans are not perfect. The makers were not perfect. But your species shows the essential quality they valued most. You feel deeply. You connect across barriers. You see someone suffering and your first instinct is to help, even when it serves no logical purpose, even when it costs you dearly. Other species feel emotion, Phylax protested. Yes, but humans feel and then act. Your empathy drives you to change things, to fix what is broken, to heal what is wounded. You're not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the oldest, but you are the kindest, and that makes you the Maker's truest children. The hologram faded. They stood in the chamber again, the sphere hovering before David expectantly. This one is authorized to transfer full archive control to verified Maker descendants. Do you accept the inheritance, little gardener? Will you carry on what the cultivators began? David looked at his hands. Hands, just human, just one person who had no idea what he was doing. The weight of 50,000 years pressed down on him. I need time to think. The sphere brightened, pleased. That response confirms your worthiness. The makers predicted only worthy ones would hesitate before accepting power. 3 days later, 17 council ships hung in orbit around Terminus 7. Word had spread fast. An archive activation after 50,000 years of silence demanded attention from the highest authorities. David sat in a conference room that the archive had generated from nothing, watching representatives from a dozen species argue about what his existence meant. Genetic coincidence, Ambassador Threll of the Kelthani insisted. His crystalline body refracted light in sharp angles. Nothing more. To claim humans are special based on protein sequences is absurd. The archive's recognition protocols have remained consistent for 50 millennia, Wren countered. She'd become David's unexpected defender, scientific curiosity overriding her initial dismissal of humans. We cannot ignore empirical data because we dislike its implications. David rubbed his temples. The headache had started 2 days ago and refused to leave. The archive kept trying to establish a neural link with him, offering connection to all its knowledge. He kept refusing, terrified of what accepting might mean. May this one address the assembly? The archive's voice filled the room. It had been quiet during most of the debate, content to observe. Now its sphere materialized in the chamber's center, uninvited but undeniable. "You may speak," High Chancellor Vorn said. The elderly Draxian led the council and carried authority that even the archive seemed to respect. "Gratitude. This one has listened to your concerns. You fear human dominance. You question the validity of recognition protocols. You wonder if this one's assessment is flawed. These concerns are logical and understandable." The sphere pulsed once. Throughout the room, holographic displays activated. Medical formulas, energy generation schematics, agricultural techniques that could feed billions. The knowledge flowed freely, available to all. The makers did not create hierarchy. They did not establish one species above others. They planted seeds and hoped for gardens. All species present evolved through your own efforts, developed your own unique strengths. The Kelthani mastered crystalline computing. The Valtari achieved genetic optimization. The Draxians built societies of perfect cooperation. Each accomplishment honors you. Then why recognize only humans? Threll demanded. Because recognition is not reward. It is burden. The makers needed inheritors who would nurture others, not dominate them, who would distribute knowledge freely rather than hoarding it. This one has just given you technologies that would have taken your species centuries to develop independently. Do you see the human claiming ownership, demanding payment, asserting authority? All eyes turned to David. He sat slumped in his chair, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. Not triumphant, not power-hungry, just tired. The makers chose correctly. The archive continued. They knew worthy inheritors would share rather than conquer. The human David Reed has not requested anything from this one. He has asked repeatedly if this one is certain. He worries constantly about other species feeling diminished. His first question after learning his genetic heritage was whether he could refuse if it would prevent conflict. Pretty words, Phylax said. The commander had been quiet until now. But humanity has wars. They fight among themselves constantly. How does that demonstrate their supposed kindness? David looked up, meeting the Draxian's four-eyed gaze. You're right. We're not special. We're not better than anyone else. We've done terrible things to each other and to our own world. We're selfish and short-sighted, and we make the same mistakes over and over. The room went silent. But we try. We fail constantly, but we keep trying. We see suffering, and even though we caused it, even though fixing it is hard and thankless, we attempt to make things better. Not all of us, not even most of us, but enough humans care enough to keep pushing forward. That's all we are, a species that cares despite having every reason not to. The archive brightened. The makers were the same. They nearly destroyed themselves 3 times before achieving interstellar travel. Their history contains wars, genocides, environmental collapse. They were not saints. They were gardeners who kept planting even after previous gardens failed. They saw their own flaws and chose to help others avoid the same mistakes. A new hologram appeared. The cultivators again, but different, younger. flawed, fighting among themselves, making mistakes, learning slowly and painfully. Their history looked remarkably like humanity's current path. This one shows you this not to diminish other species, but to provide context. The makers succeeded because they refused to give up on compassion despite evidence that compassion was impractical. Humans demonstrate that same stubborn insistence on caring. It is not logical. It is not efficient. It is essential. High Chancellor Vorn stood, his great bulk commanding attention. Archive, can other species access this knowledge? Can we use what the makers left behind? Yes, completely, without restriction. This one exists to share, not to gatekeep. The makers wanted their knowledge to benefit all life, not create new hierarchies. Then what is the point of recognizing humans specifically? The archive dimmed slightly. Because this one must warn you. All of you. There is danger coming. The makers left this one with a final message, sealed until a worthy inheritor appeared. Now that message can be delivered. The chamber's walls disappeared. They floated in space, watching a fleet of ships unlike anything David had ever seen. Massive, dark, wrong somehow, as if they violated fundamental laws of reality just by existing. The Reapers, they came for the makers. They demanded access to cultivator technology. They intended to use it for conquest, for domination, for the extinction of any species that resisted. The makers refused. The keepers died defending their archives. This one was sealed, programmed to wait for inheritors mature enough to face what is coming. The fleet moved through space, destroying worlds. David felt sick watching civilizations burn. They sleep now, in deep space. Their systems conserve power, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. But this one has detected anomalies. Power fluctuations. Signals. The Reapers are beginning to wake. When they do, every species in this galaxy will face a choice. Unite or perish. The vision faded. They sat in the conference room again, but everything had changed. This wasn't about human recognition anymore. This was survival. How long? Vorn asked quietly. Unknown. Perhaps years. Perhaps months. But they are coming, and this one needs help preparing. That is why the makers designed recognition protocols. Not to create rulers, but to identify species capable of inspiring others to work together. This one cannot fight, but humans can unite. The conference room cleared within minutes. Ambassadors rushed to their ships, desperate to report to their homeworlds. An ancient threat awakening was the kind of crisis that ended political careers if handled poorly. David remained seated, watching them scatter like startled birds. Only Ren, Phylax, and Chancellor Vorn stayed behind. The old Draxian studied David with eyes that had seen 600 years of council politics. You understand what the archive is asking of you. Vorn's voice rumbled like distant thunder. It wants you to convince dozens of species to trust each other. Species that have competed for resources and territory for millennia. This is not a small task. I know. David's voice came out smaller than he intended. I'm a xenoarchaeologist. I dig up old things and write papers nobody reads. I'm not a leader. The makers chose well regardless. Vorn moved toward the door, then paused. The archive said humans unite people. Prove it. You have 6 months before the council votes on whether to pool military resources. Convince them cooperation is worth the risk. The door closed behind him. David dropped his head into his hands. This is insane. I can't do this. Yes, you can. Ren sat beside him, her alien features softening with something that might have been sympathy. You already started. Did you notice what happened in that meeting? Threll stopped objecting once the archive revealed the Reaper threat. Phylax offered Draxian military support. You didn't convince them with speeches. You convinced them by being genuine. Being terrified and confused is genuine, David muttered. Exactly. You didn't pretend to have answers. You admitted humanity's flaws. That honesty made the archive's claims about you believable. If you'd postured or demanded authority, they would have dismissed you immediately. Phylax checked his weapons, a nervous habit David had noticed. The researcher is correct. My people respect strength, but we trust vulnerability more. A leader who admits weakness can be followed. one who pretends invincibility cannot. David looked up at them both. So what do I do now? The archive sphere appeared, smaller this time, less overwhelming. This one suggests beginning with understanding. The Reapers are not simple enemies. They were once like you, like all of you. Then something changed them. A new hologram materialized. Beings that resembled a terrible fusion of organic and mechanical parts. Their eyes glowed with cold intelligence, but something was missing. Some spark that made life more than mere function. They called themselves the inheritors. 20,000 years ago, they discovered a cache of advanced technology. Not from a makers, but from another extinct civilization. That technology promised perfection, efficiency, the elimination of weakness and suffering. They embraced it completely. The hologram showed the transformation. Biological beings gradually replacing their bodies with machines. At first voluntary, then mandatory, then forced upon conquered species. The process consumed everything that made them individuals. They became what they found, a hive mind devoted to assimilation. They saw the Maker's philosophy of nurturing diversity as dangerous chaos. They demanded the Makers surrender all technology and submit to integration. The Makers refused. War followed. David watched civilizations burn, watched the cultivators fight not with weapons, but with desperate creativity, trying to find ways to awaken the Reaper's lost individuality. They failed. The Keepers died buying time for the archives to seal themselves for the knowledge to survive. The Makers wounded them severely, disabled most of their fleet. The survivors retreated to deep space and entered hibernation, conserving power, waiting for the galaxy to forget them. This one has monitored their status for 50,000 years. 6 months ago, this one detected the first power fluctuation. 3 months ago, a second. 2 weeks ago, a third. The pattern is accelerating. How many ships? Phylax asked. 47 capital vessels. 316 support craft. Approximately 12 billion integrated drones. They had conquered 14 species before facing the Makers. Those species still exist within the Reaper network, their descendants transformed into components. The number was incomprehensible. David tried to imagine 12 billion minds enslaved to a single purpose and couldn't. His brain refused to process that scale of horror. Can they be stopped? Ren's scientific detachment had cracked. She sounded afraid. Unknown. The Makers nearly succeeded. They developed weapons capable of disrupting Reaper networks, technologies that could restore individual consciousness. But the Keepers destroyed most of that knowledge rather than let it fall into Reaper hands. This one has fragments, partial schematics, incomplete theories, not enough to guarantee victory. Then what chance do we have? David asked. If the Makers couldn't stop them, how can we? The archive pulsed warmly. Because you are not alone. The Makers fought as a single species against an enemy that had consumed 14 civilizations. You have a council, dozens of species, each with unique strengths. The Valtari's genetic engineering, the Kelthani's computational networks, the Draxian military coordination, humanity's adaptability and empathy. Together, you represent diversity the Reapers cannot comprehend. Phylax crossed his upper arms, thinking. The archive provides technology. We provide implementation. Different species handle different aspects. Play to our strengths rather than trying to match the enemy's uniformity. Precisely. The Reapers expect opponents to fight like them. Hierarchical, rigid, predictable. They have never faced an alliance of truly different minds working toward a common goal. This one believes that unpredictability is your greatest weapon. David stood and walked to the hologram, studying the Reaper vessels. They looked invincible, unstoppable, but the archive was right. They were also uniform, every ship identical, every tactic predictable. They'd optimized themselves into a single solution for every problem. We don't need to match their strength, he said slowly. We need to be what they can't understand. They consumed species to eliminate diversity. We need to celebrate it. Use our differences as advantages instead of obstacles. Ren smiled. Now you sound like a leader. I sound like I'm making things up as I go. That's what leadership is. Vorn's voice came through the room's communication system. This one has been listening. David Reed. The council will hear your proposal in 3 days. Use that time wisely. The archive will provide what knowledge it can. The rest depends on your ability to make different species trust each other. The communication ended. David looked at his companions, at the archive, at the holographic reapers still burning their way through history. 3 days to save the galaxy. No pressure. The archive brightened with what might have been amusement. The makers often said their best ideas came from desperation. You are their child. This one has faith. David spent 2 days talking with representatives from every council species. Each conversation revealed the same pattern. They wanted to cooperate. They feared cooperation would leave them vulnerable. Trust was a luxury none of them could afford it on the 3rd day. He stood before the full council assembly. 200 delegates representing 43 species filled the chamber. Every eye, compound or single or arranged in patterns David couldn't quite follow, watched him. He'd spent the previous night vomiting from anxiety. I'm not going to tell you humanity is special, he began. His voice echoed in the vast space. I'm not going to claim we have answers you don't. 3 days ago, I was a researcher who studied dead civilizations. Now I'm supposed to convince you to trust each other with your lives. I'm not qualified for this. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several delegates looked confused. This wasn't how speeches of this importance typically started. But here's what I learned talking to all of you. The Kelthani fear giving up technological advantage. The Valtari worry genetic knowledge will be weaponized. The Draxians don't trust species without military tradition. Every species has legitimate reasons not to cooperate. You've competed for thousands of years. That history matters. Ambassador Threll stood. Then why are we here? If you acknowledge cooperation is impossible, what is the point? Because the Reapers don't care about your legitimate reasons. They're going to wake up, and when they do, they won't negotiate. They won't respect sovereignty. They'll convert or destroy every species they encounter. Your fears about cooperation are real, but they're nothing compared to the certainty of extinction if we face this threat separately. David pulled up a hologram the archive had helped to prepare. Simulations showing different scenarios. Each one played out based on realistic assumptions about Reaper capabilities and council response. Scenario 1. Each species defends themselves. The Reapers defeat us individually within 3 years. Scenario 2. We form a traditional military alliance with unified command structure. We last maybe 5 years before internal conflicts and cultural differences fracture the alliance. Scenario 3. We do something the Reapers won't expect. We stay separate but connected. Each species contributes what they do best. No one surrenders sovereignty. No one sacrifices identity. But we share information freely and coordinate actions. The hologram showed this scenario playing out. Ships of different designs working in concert but not uniformity. Battle plans that incorporated multiple strategic philosophies. Victory not through matching the enemy's strength, but through unpredictable cooperation. The archive gave me access to the Maker's war records. You want to know why they almost won? Not because they were stronger, because the Reapers kept expecting them to act like a hive mind, and they never did. Every cultivator's ship operated independently, but they trusted each other completely. That trust let them create chaos the Reapers couldn't predict or counter. Ren stood from the research delegation. You're proposing organized chaos. Cooperation without integration. That requires more trust than a unified command structure, not less. I know, but think about it. Right now you don't trust each other because you fear loss of control. What if we designed cooperation that let you maintain control? The Kelthani developed computational systems. The Valtari handle biological countermeasures. The Draxians coordinate fleet movements. Humanity does what we apparently do best and makes sure everyone keeps talking to each other. And if one species betrays the others? Phylax asked. He'd become an unexpected ally, but he still asked the hard questions. If someone uses shared knowledge for advantage, then we all lose. But that's already true. If the Reapers divide us, we all die anyway. This way we at least have a chance. The The debate continued for hours. David answered every question he could and admitted when he didn't know. The archive provided technical specifications. Wren presented research on Reaper tactics. Phylax outlined military coordination protocols that preserved autonomy while enabling cooperation. Finally, Chancellor Vorn called for silence. This one has heard enough. The human's proposal is unconventional. It requires trust we may not possess. But refusing cooperation guarantees our destruction. This one calls for a vote. All in favor of establishing the Coordinated Defense Initiative as proposed. The vote wasn't unanimous. 12 species abstained. 4 voted against. But 37 species approved the proposal. It was enough. David felt his knees go weak with relief. Then the archive's voice filled the chamber, urgent in a way he'd never heard before. This one detects emergency broadcast. Reaper vessel has activated. Full power. Current location, Frontier System Gamma, 447. Colony world with 12 million inhabitants. The vessel is moving toward the planet. The relief shattered. Every delegate started shouting at once. Gamma, 447 was a joint colony, multiple species living together in one of the Council's rare integration experiments. If the Reapers destroyed it, the symbolism would shatter their fragile alliance before it began. How long until the Reaper reaches the colony? Vorn demanded. 18 hours at current speed. And our nearest fleet, 22 hours. Silence felt like a wait. They were 4 hours too slow. 12 million people were going to die, and there was nothing they could do. David felt something break inside his chest. Not despair, anger. Archive, can you give me direct communication with every ship in this system? Yes. Do it. Now. His face appeared on screens throughout the Council fleet. 200 ships from 43 species, all designed differently, all operating independently. This wasn't going to work. It had to work. This is David Reed. I know we just voted to cooperate. I know we plan to take months organizing. We don't have months. We have 18 hours to save 12 million people. The Reapers expect us to either run or arrive too late. So we're going to do neither. Every ship capable of faster-than-light travel. Plot a jump to Gamma, 447. We're not going to fight the Reaper. We're going to evacuate the colony before it arrives. Impossible, someone said. We don't have enough transport capacity. Then we make capacity. Cargo ships, passenger liners, military transports, private vessels, everything. Strip out the weapons if you have to and make room. The Valtari have the fastest ships. They scout and coordinate landing zones. The Draxians have the best logistics algorithms. They organize the evacuation order. The Kelthani have superior sensors. They track the Reaper and give us real-time updates. Humanity provides the translators to prevent panic. Everybody does what they do best. He took a breath. The Reapers think we'll abandon those people. Let's show them what cooperation actually looks like. Let's save them all. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Phylax spoke. Draxian fleet is recalculating cargo capacity now. We can take 400,000 if we remove armaments. Kelthani vessels are repositioning for sensor network, Threll added. We'll give you precise Reaper location updates. Species after species volunteered ships, resources, personnel. The impossible became barely possible became their only chance. The fleet jumped toward Gamma, 447. They had 18 hours to prove cooperation meant something. Gamma 447's main settlement looked like controlled chaos when the fleet arrived. 12 million people from 6 different species trying to evacuate a planet in 17 hours. Ships descended in waves, coordinated by Draxian logistics officers who worked with frightening efficiency. The Valtari scouts had marked optimal landing zones. Kelthani sensors tracked every ship, every person, every potential problem. David stood in the makeshift command center, translating between species whose communication protocols had never been designed to work together. A Valtari evacuation coordinator needed to explain biochemical requirements to a Draxian ship captain. A human family refused to leave without their pet. A Kelthani elder wanted to save historical records. Every problem needed a solution, and they needed it immediately. Reaper vessel will reach orbital range in 43 minutes, the archive reported. Its sphere hovered in the center of the command center, processing data from hundreds of sources simultaneously. Current evacuation status is 87% complete. 13%. Over a million people still on the ground. They weren't going to make it. Can we slow the Reaper down? Phylax asked. His military mind searched for tactical solutions. Negative. This one has analyzed the vessel's trajectory. Any attempt to engage will accelerate its attack timeline. The Reaper is currently approaching cautiously, scanning for defenses. Engagement will trigger immediate assault protocols. Then we need more time. Ren worked 3 holographic displays at once, coordinating medical teams. Can we increase transport efficiency? Already at maximum safe capacity, a Draxian logistics officer reported. We are loading beyond recommended limits. Further increases risk structural failure during atmospheric exit. David watched the numbers. 13%. A million lives. The Reapers had won already, and the battle hadn't even started. They'd forced the Council to choose between fighting and saving people. The Alliance would shatter the moment they left those million behind. Unless... Archive, can you take control of the Reaper ship? Silence. Every head in the command center turned toward him. Explain your reasoning, the archive said carefully. The Reapers are a hive mind, networked intelligence. You're an AI that's existed for 50,000 years. Can you hack their systems? Not to destroy the ship, just to slow it down. Give us another hour. This one could attempt network infiltration. However, success probability is low. The Reapers will have sophisticated defenses against AI intrusion. They consumed multiple species with advanced computational abilities. Their firewalls are formidable, but possible, inadvisable. If this one fails, the Reaper will detect the attempt and accelerate its attack. We will lose the time we have. David looked at the numbers again. 13%. If we don't try, we lose anyway. Those million people will die, and every species will blame each other for not doing enough. The Alliance ends before it begins. The archive pulsed thoughtfully. You would risk everything for 13%. The Makers would have. Warmth flooded through the sphere. Yes, they would have. Very well. This one will attempt infiltration. Preparing intrusion protocols now. David Reed, if this one fails, the responsibility falls to you. The fleet must jump to safety. Preserve the Alliance, even if this one cannot preserve everyone. I understand. The archive's presence dimmed as it focused its full processing power on the Reaper ship. In the command center, everyone held their breath. 30 seconds passed. A minute. 2 minutes. Intrusion detected, the archive reported. Its voice sounded strained. Reaper countermeasures are formidable. This one is encountering resistance patterns that suggest the ship contains fragments of 14 different species' computational knowledge. The Reapers have prepared well. Can you break through? Phylax asked. Unknown. This one is attempting multiple attack vectors simultaneously. The Reaper mind is vast but rigid, looking for weakness in its uniformity. 3 minutes. The evacuation continued below. Ships rising loaded with refugees. Landing pads immediately filling with the next group. The system worked with desperate efficiency, but time was running out. Partial success, the archive announced. This one has access peripheral systems. Navigational controls remain locked, but this one has compromised sensor arrays. The Reaper is now blind in 17% of its detection spectrum. What does that do for us? Ren asked. It slows the ship. The Reaper is cautious now, scanning with reduced capability. Approach speed has decreased by 14%. You have gained 12 additional minutes. 12 minutes. Not an hour, but something. David pulled up the evacuation projections. With 12 extra minutes, they could reach 94%. Still 6% short, but better. Fewer people abandoned. Keep going, archive. Look for anything else we can use. Attempting deeper intrusion now. This one has identified a vulnerability. The Reaper's integration of 14 species created redundancy in some systems, but gaps in others. There is a communication protocol mismatch between what used to be separate species. This one is exploiting that gap. The minutes crawled past. 90% evacuated. 92%. The Reaper drew closer despite the Archive's interference. Critical success, the Archive said suddenly. This one has accessed the Reaper's cargo systems. There are beings inside that ship. Living beings. The descendants of species the Reapers converted. They exist in stasis, their minds integrated into the network, but their bodies preserved. Why preserve the bodies? David asked. Unknown. Possibly as backup biological templates. Possibly as spare processing substrate. But they are alive, David read. Millions of them. And this one has found something the makers would have wanted you to know. The Archive displayed genetic data. Complex sequences that looked almost, but not quite like patterns David recognized. Some of these beings carry markers similar to yours. Not identical, but related. The Reapers converted other species descended from Maker-seeded worlds. Your genetic cousins are inside that ship, enslaved to the hive mind. The Makers would have wanted them freed. David felt something settle in his chest. Not fear anymore. Purpose. Then we don't destroy the Reaper. We save it. We save everyone inside. Impossible, Phylax said. We lack the capability. Not today, but someday. Archive, can you plant a virus? Something that won't activate now, but will spread through the Reaper network over time? Something that will start waking those people up, helping them remember who they were. The Archive brightened. Yes, this one can do that. It will take years to spread fully. Decades perhaps. But it will work. The Reapers will awaken to find their own victims becoming individuals again. Their perfect uniformity corrupted by diversity from within. Do it. The last ships lifted off as the Reaper entered orbit. 100% evacuation complete. Every single person saved. The fleet jumped away as the Reaper settled over the empty colony, scanning for targets that no longer existed. Deep in its systems, hidden in code the hive mind couldn't detect, a virus began to spread. Slow, patient, inevitable, teaching enslaved minds to dream of freedom again. David watched the Reaper from the safety of faster-than-light travel. The Makers would be proud. They would be, the Archive agreed. You saved everyone, even those you could not reach. That is what it means to be a gardener. You plant seeds knowing you may not see them grow. But you plant them anyway. Back in Council space, the impossible had happened. 43 species had worked together and saved 12 million lives. The alliance was real now. Tested and proven. There would be challenges ahead. The Reapers would awaken fully. The war would come, but they would face it together. Different species with different strengths, united not by uniformity, but by choice. By the decision to care about beings different from themselves. By the stubborn insistence on nurturing life, even when destruction seemed easier. The Makers would have called it gardening. David just called it being human. And now, maybe being more than human. Being what the galaxy needed.